All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be reacting to a video by Thor Skywalker. He made a video about the Kathleen Kennedy Disney South Park Panderverse episode. It was a good episode. They really hit Disney and Kathleen Kennedy specifically hard. He had a good video about it, and I wanted to react to it and respond to a couple of points that he had. I will be putting this video link down into the description, so make sure you go check him out. He's a good content creator. He focuses a lot on Star Wars on this channel. All right, and let's go ahead and get into it.
Now, over the years, there's been a few times where something happens, some piece of news drops, or some show does something, or someone says something either very interesting or very controversial, or maybe just plain stupid, and I'll get flooded with messages and or emails asking me if I saw this or heard about it and what I think, and I'll usually try to respond with a video if enough people seem interested in the topic.
Why I see paused on this screen. I'm looking at Kathleen Kennedy the entire time. My God, man, what are you doing?
That's one of the things I like to do here, to have a sort of open line of communication and to treat this channel as a discussion with those who watch it. But never before have I got as many messages over something that I have.
I don't know if this one's better.
In the last day or so for the new South Park special called Joining the Panderverse. With many of those messages saying something along the lines of it destroys Kathleen Kennedy, Bob Iger, and Disney itself. And so I, of course, watched the episode. And honestly, I haven't seen much South Park over the years. I watched it a lot when it was new, when it first came out, but haven't really kept up with it. Not because I don't necessarily like it, it's just one of those things I don't think of watching. Though when I do watch it, which usually happens when what they've done becomes a, shall we say, trending topic, I find that, yeah, more often than not, they manage to, sometimes very subtly even, make some damn good points. And usually what I admire about them, about the show, is that they'll make them both ways. That they'll make this sort of argument for both sides, and sometimes perhaps help you realize just how ridiculous something is. And so if I'm being completely honest, and some won't want to hear this, they'll probably just want to hear me further slam dunk on Disney. And make no mistake, this episode does dunk on Disney. But there certainly was a lot more to it than that. And I'm not just talking about the whole AI aspect of this episode, which was maybe equally fascinating. That this episode points out how it's taking jobs away from people and leaving them not knowing how to really do anything or anything with their own two hands. And that, ironically, considering how much college tends to be pushed on young people as if it is the only answer or only way to get a decent job and achieve a good life.
He makes a good point. We have failed our kids when it comes to college, and we have not prepared them to, as far as how to live and do things with their own hands. Like the hardwood floor in my house, I replaced it myself, right? I got the tools, I did the work. Not many people can do that. Certain things I'll have like electricians or whatever come in to do the work because I don't want to electrocute myself. But we have pushed our kids to constantly go to school. And we're like college, everybody. And the only thing that's really done is it's made a lot of people get extremely high college debt through student loans because the federal government ensures that the money continues to flow for all these loans to the schools. So the school increases the cost all the time, never decreases it. And then these kids, there's not a lot of good advisors, I guess, at these schools, or the parents, I guess, should be doing it, but they're not. They let these kids get these degrees that, honestly, while they may be good degrees on the whole, but when it comes to getting jobs, they suck because there's not that many of them. So when they get out of school, they expect to get this $100,000 job. Well, guess what? There are none. They're right. AI is taking people's jobs, but the jobs that won't be taken, plumbers, carpenters, roofers, people who do physical manual labor, because we're decades away from having robots to be able to even do anything like that.
It shows that those who didn't go to college and instead learned how to do something are getting the last laugh. That at least right now, AI cannot physically fix things, not until robots become more advanced, that is, which I'm sure they will someday, and then we'll all be screwed. But anyway, though, I think there's a ton that could be unpacked there, and I think AI could be an interesting topic on this channel, though more in terms of the creativity side of things. Something tells me that virtually everyone who messaged me...
I do think AI will be a big benefit on the creativity side of things. In Hollywood, I think it should be used. They just need to control and manage how it's used so that it doesn't completely replace everybody. But I definitely think, like, in terms of animation, and whatnot, it can help speed up the process. So we get a lot more of these animes that come over faster, cheaper, and hopefully we'll get more than just kind of one season, because there's a ton of anime out there where you only get one season, or it takes 4 to 5 years before you get a second season. So I'm hoping AI kind of helps with some of that. But that's a topic for a completely different video, because we're here to focus on Kathleen Kennedy.
He wanted me to talk about Disney and Kathleen Kennedy, those aspects of this episode. And again, a lot of the messages I got were people telling me South Park just utterly destroyed them. And I think they did, for the most part. I think the primary target of this was, yes, Disney and obviously Kennedy, and how they've kind of ruined the film industry, mainly by getting lazy. I absolutely loved the incorporation of the multiverse into the episode, or this special, I guess it was, and how lame the idea is, despite how hard they try to sell it as something incredible and mind-blowing, that it tends to just allow for some really, really lazy or convenient writing. South Park was also the ones who came up with the term member berries, which is another way that arguably Hollywood has gotten worse or just lazy.
He hates this term, member berries, but it is true that the Hollywood has gotten lazy. They do depend on member berries. You definitely have seen this, especially in the Ahsoka series that Disney Plus came out. I loved Ahsoka from the Star Wars Clone Wars. Initially, she was annoying because she was a kid. What kid is not annoying, to be honest with you? But I really liked her character. I thought they fleshed her out really well later on in the series. But in Ahsoka, the actual series, TV show named after her, I thought it was horrible. It was boring. Lazy writing, yet more people getting stabbed with lightsabers and miraculously surviving. But they brought in certain people like Anakin, which I love. I love Hayden Christensen as Anakin. I would love to see more of him. But those were some of the best moments of Ahsoka, but they only put them in there for what they call member berries. The whole show, if you never watched Clone Wars or Rebels, which essentially Ahsoka was like the fifth season, I believe it was, of Rebels, because I think they stopped at 4. Either way, it's considered like the next season of Rebels. And if you never watched Rebels, you don't really know what's going on, because the show doesn't tell you. The show doesn't explain a lot of this stuff to you. So you might not know who some of these people are, but if you've watched Rebels, then that's where the member berries come in. You're like, oh, I know that person. Oh, I know that person. Oh, I remember seeing them in Rebels. That's so cool. Stuff like that. There's a balancing act. I don't mind member berries, but I want content to be juicy, to be good. I don't want to just want to watch the show because I get to see a certain actor or a certain character again. I want it to be good when I see that character. Like Thrawn was a complete disappointment.
Easy by essentially remaking or recycling everything instead of having original ideas anymore. And along with this, they've turned to pandering, or the pander stone, and just sort of remake the same films over and over and over again. But
we know they don't have original ideas. That's why they're remaking all these animated movies they previously have been successful with into live action. Not to mention certain changes, which kind of goes into the phrase Panderverse, because they're pandering to a certain core audience. Well, not even core audience, to a certain group of people. And honestly, it's not successful. It's not. The only reason it was successful initially is because you still had your core audience there who trusted you to make good content and was there for that content. But when they realized that the content was horrible and you were only putting people in certain positions to pander, and that was your priority, you started losing money.
Since they are diverse now, that's all that should matter. That even though it is the 100th superhero movie to come out in the last decade or so, and yes, I'm exaggerating, I think, you should go and see it.
It's pretty high, I would imagine.
A little to nothing new story-wise, or maybe not even being very good, but you should see it simply because it's the first superhero who looks like this, or is of this sexuality, or whatever else it might be. And of course, this approach, the pandering approach, has long since been noticed by the fans of these properties or these franchises, fans who above anything and everything else only care about the stories or the films or shows themselves. They don't so much care about diversity, which no is not the same as flat out rejecting the mere idea of diversity.
True. I don't want them pandering. I want them to make good content. I don't care. about diversity. I don't care whether or not you keep track of how many black people, how many Hispanic people, how many white people, how many whoever people on these shows. I don't really care. I want good content. Like when they made Nick Fury a black guy, I didn't care. It was Samuel L. fucking Jackson. The dude carried his own weight. He made that role his. He came in and there was no question that was Nick Fury because they wrote it well and he acted well. Well, he performed well. So diversity isn't inherently bad, but you don't want people thinking you don't want people thinking about it. You want people to come in and watch your movie and get so engrossed in the story, they don't realize that you race swap somebody. They don't realize that you change certain things, right? The problem is they've made it such a priority for them that it's become a problem. They don't just do it for the sake of, they do it just for the sake of doing it. They don't do it and then focus on the story and make sure that the story is good. They don't do that. Everything is pandering. Kathleen Kennedy came out when she did the whole Star Wars, the first movie for Disney. The Force is female. And we've seen since then, everything about it for the most part has been the Force is female. All your main characters, a lot of your even side characters, they're female. Everything is female. That's a problem because we know why you're doing it. And the worst part of it is it's not even good. Poor John Boyega, look what they did to his character. He was the first person you saw in the very first trailer for The Force Awakens. Came out as a stormtrooper, took his helmet off. He's kind of looked like he was kind of in a panic attack because he was, now that we know he's kind of fighting the whole brainwashing thing that you're doing there. That was cool. That was interesting. We thought, especially in the first movie, when he had that lightsaber, I thought, oh shit, man, he's going to be a Jedi. No. They fucked his character up on purpose because you know why? The Force is female. That's why. They can't have, because I think they were running through the desert or whatever in the first movie, running away from, they were being attacked and they were running. And he tried to help her and be like, come on. She's like, let go of my hand. I don't need any help. I'll have to find that clip and put it here so you can see it.
Come on, we gotta move. I know how to run without holding my hand.
But it's shit like that. That's the problem with a lot of this content. The Force is female. The woman is super powerful. She doesn't need any help. Doesn't need any training. Man bad. And then poor, like I said, poor John Boyega. I mean, his role was so reduced. I don't know how much of that had to do with China. Because, China, they don't like black people. They are kind of racist, So you could see that when they took his picture from the North American poster for that movie and really shrunk it down. So shrunk his head and his face down and made him a lot less prominent on that poster for China. Or when they released Black Panther in China, they put his mask on in the poster. They didn't show his face without the mask like they did in North America. So they pander just for North America. When it comes to China or these other places, they don't. They take that shit out as much as they can so that they can still sell their stuff over there and make what money. So this is part of the problem. They pander for the sake of pandering for a small minority of people who are on Twitter. Yeah, it's horrible. It really is. This show hit the nail on the head so well.
It does not automatically make you an ist of some kind because you take issue with, say, maybe a once male character becoming a female character now.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You complain at all. You're racist. You're a homophobe. You're a transphobe. I mean, all of these things. You're a bigot. That's their automatic go-to defense because nobody likes to be called that. A lot of people kind of shy away, be like, no, please, sir, don't cancel me. Don't call me all those names. I'll stop. You're right. Most people will do that. They're afraid. But that's why they make these excuses. But they've done it so much now for everything. That's their knee-jerk reaction now that it doesn't work anymore.
Now, as this episode even tries to point out with the swapping of the Cartmans, and I think it makes the point quite well, but it just feels off to suddenly have a character who has always been known one way to be of a different race or gender or whatever.
Imagine
it might
that.
be. and done just because you want things to be diverse. And if you don't like it, if you don't like the switch, again, that doesn't automatically mean you hate the race and or gender they have been switched to.
Exactly.
It's just that sometimes it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense story-wise. Again, that's what the episode tried to point out with the...
It's not that it doesn't make sense story-wise. It's you're changing the lore. You're changing the story. People like stories for the simple fact that it's from point A to point Z, and you have all the details from point A to point Z that matter. When you have multiple books of the same story, each book lays down the groundwork. It lays down details that matter. And when you go in and change something in one of those books, and it happens to be a detail that matters, not just some side character that you hardly see, but a main character or a main plot point or a main lore point, that matters. And so people want things to be consistent, because if you can't be consistent in a story, what's the point of the story? There is no point to the story. People like stories because it's from point A to point Z, and you get the build up and then the climax. But when you start changing things, that's not what was written. That's not the original story. So people start to dislike that, especially when you're doing it for the sake of doing it. And then the story as a whole is different. It's not that you just race swapped. Sometimes it is. Well, I would say initially people didn't care. People didn't care about the race swapping. They were okay with it. Like I said, Nick Fury, Samuel L. Jackson, people didn't care. But when it started getting to the point where you were doing it constantly over everything, and it became obvious that the only reason you're doing it was for virtue points, that's when people started caring. Like with the whole Little Mermaid. We know why they did that. They didn't do it so that little girls can see themselves on the screen. Little black girls, little Hispanic girls have never had a problem. Little black kids, little Hispanic kids, little white kids or whatever have never had a problem seeing themselves in the screen, because they don't look at TV like, oh, that could be me. The only times they do that is like with superheroes. Do you think they care what color the skin is of the superhero? No. They put themselves in that position. They don't look for a black guy, be like, oh, I'm black, I can do that. Or I'm white, that's me. No, they don't do that. I used to fly around as Superman, not because I was white, but because I loved Superman. I loved his powers. I used to dream about flying through my daycare. Granted, I could only get, for whatever reason, 5 feet off the ground. I don't really know why I couldn't fly higher, but I used to dream that way. And that was cool. That was cool as a kid. I didn't care what color skin they were. I thought Black Panther was cool. I thought all these people were cool. It doesn't matter. People don't need to see the same color of their skin to feel like they can relate. And if it's that way today, well, there's only one reason that's that way today. It's because people are racist and they point everything out when it comes to skin color and all this other stuff. And it's not the white people. Well, maybe some white people, because there are certain white people that want to be offended for every other group of people. But it's the parents. It's the community that these people live in. They want to make everything about race. So that if kids nowadays can't relate to somebody unless they look like them, that's why. It's because the people surrounding that kid has made everything about race. Period.
New Cartman just being there out of nowhere. That said, and the show also makes this point quite well with the Cartman and Kennedy conversation towards the end, but when you write thousands of letters, which was the case in the show, when you write thousands of letters complaining about this, or probably more accurately here in the real world, you make countless videos or take to social media somewhere to complain about it all the time, but you might just provoke those making this type of content or those putting diversity into everything to double down. And I mean, if you are Kathleen Kennedy, and there have been, I don't know, millions of angry social media posts made about you, some quite nasty to say the least, as well as tens of thousands of YouTube videos made about you, hating on you and complaining about you, what you've done to Star Wars and how all it does now is push female characters. For one, how does that actually make you feel just as a human being with actual feelings and emotions?
I don't care how
much
does
that hate get to you? I mean, I have pretty thick skin, and I gotta say, sometimes reading a hateful...
Look, if you're trying to argue that all these people making YouTube videos, sending in hate mail or whatever, sure, you're going to have assholes. You're going to have racist assholes. You're going to have non-racist assholes. There's racist assholes on both sides of the political spectrum, of the, whatever dividing line there is. There's racist assholes on both sides, right? You keep a character white, you're going to have racist assholes complaining. You even slightly make that character lighter than their dark skin that they think it should be, you're going to get racist assholes on Twitter going, I fixed it for you, right? I mean, it's so, if you're going to sit here and tell me that these people complaining, making YouTube videos, critiquing what you're doing, calling you out on that shit that you're doing, if you're going to tell me that makes you double down or hurts your feelings or you can't handle it, the bitch, you shouldn't be in the position you're in. Whatever that may be. Content creation on YouTube, the director of Lucasfilms making Star Wars movies, the CEO of Disney, whatever position you're in. If you can't handle the fire, get the hell out of the kitchen. You don't deserve to be there. That's bullshit. You're there to make content. You're there to make money as a business, not to virtue signal. If the shit you're doing ain't working, change it up. Listen to your fans. Don't just sit here and claim, oh, that's a vocal minority. Well, bitch, your movies are losing money. Or the amount of money they are making is going lower and lower and lower. Get your shit together. Stop complaining about the people complaining to you and start listening to what they're complaining about and change it so that you bring fans into the seats that give you money to see your content. All you're doing is dividing people. When you divide your pie, guess what? There's less pie to go around. Guess what? You're going to make less money at that point. You need that pie to be as big as possible. So if you're doing something that's upsetting let's be honest here, a good majority of your pie, then you're doing the wrong things. You're making the wrong decisions. So if you're upset and that's causing you, because out of spite you want to double down, you're in the wrong business. You should not be in the position that you're in because you're not mature enough to handle it and continue to put out content that's going to make money. Because saying that, oh, this caused her to double down, bullshit. If that's actually the case, that's not the people's fault that made the criticism or made the YouTube videos. No, that's her fault because she's weak and she can't handle it.
Comment can indeed get to you, and I obviously get nowhere near the level she does, though who knows how much she actually reads or pays attention to. Though it's virtually impossible to not know it exists or to avoid it all, I wouldn't be surprised if she has this sort of morbid curiosity and does read or watch some of the things.
And it's rumored that she's very thin-skinned.
And two, does getting that level of rejection over what you're doing, and yes, that much hate, does that make you want to stop pushing your agenda or just want to make you fight even harder for what you believe? Is the pushback. And
I will admit, it can be rough. I think George Lucas stopped producing Star Wars after some of the criticism and critique he got from the prequels. So I understand it could be tough. But George Lucas didn't do what she did. George Lucas just stopped. He's like, okay, that's enough. You guys don't like it? I'm done. I'm out. She's not. She's doubling down on her agenda, on her ideology. And she doesn't care whether it loses Disney money or hurts Star Wars as a brand overall. No. There's a reason Star Wars as a brand has been so huge. Because there hasn't been a lot of it. So people want it. People read the books that are put out in the extended universe years ago. Because people wanted it. And there were no movies. And then when they came out with the new movies, they still made a lot of money. Hindsight 2020, obviously, so there's a lot more people that probably like the prequels today than they did at the time because they actually see what they got with Disney and they're like, shit, episodes 1 through 3 probably weren't that bad. So if you don't like the critiques, stop or change it up. Don't double down. That's not the mature way to handle things.
In her mind, not proof that what you're fighting for and against actually does exist and needs to be fought against. And do keep in mind that for a lot of those in Hollywood, I think they feel like diversity is extremely important. It is not all.
We've had diversity, guy. We've had diversity ever since I was a kid. It's always reflected how society as a whole has kind of been. Like, as far, back in the early 80s, late 80s, early 90s, It was mainly whites, blacks. You had a very small population of Hispanics and whatnot. And that reflected itself in TVs, in movies. Now, as some of that changes, I would expect it to reflect itself as well. And it has up until probably 10 years ago, somewhere around there. And that's when they really started forcing a diversity. You got like the awards or what? There's groups of, I don't know which ones they are specifically, but there's been information put out by other journalists where you won't qualify for certain awards, or you can't even get cleared to make something unless you have certain quotas in your story. Like certain amount of black people, certain amount of white people, certain amount of Asian people, which is just bullshit. And I've even heard reports where if it's all white, you won't get cleared to make that content. And that's just bullshit. I mean, growing up, I used to watch, what was the name of the show? Give me 1 second. Let me look it up. Growing up, there were a lot of diverse shows. I used to watch In Living Color, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Even before then, there was, what was the name of the show? The Jeffersons. I used to watch The Jeffersons because I loved that, the theme song, Moving On Up, right? I liked that show. That show was funny, right? And then later on, there was one of the Wayne brothers who played Major Payne. Let me get his IMDb, because he had another show. It was an all-black show. And I thought it was really funny. I used to watch it all the time. My Wife and Kids. That was it. I thought it was a really good show. I thought the guy did really well in it. I thought it was funny. I thought they covered a lot of good topics. I didn't care that they were all black. I didn't care at all. Like with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, it was a comedy, but they also covered some serious topics too, like racism. And I thought it was really well done. Diverse shows have always been there. They didn't need to be forced. The problem is, over like a decade or so ago, maybe up to 15 years ago, being white became bad. So you had all these white people, all these non-white people, essentially being anti-white. You know, that's where this whole anti-racist thing started popping up. And so they started forcing diversity for the sake of diversity into these shows. And that wasn't good. Diversity was already happening. We had women as the leads in some of these action movies as far back as the 70s and 80s. And they were damn good movies. Good actors. We didn't need to force it. And now that you're forcing it, it's all turned to shit. Because you're so worried about this diversity, that the story itself suffers. And that's a problem.